Jason Statham. The name conjures images of high-octane action, perfectly timed punches, and a steely gaze that could melt glaciers. He's built a career on playing the tough guy, the unflappable hero who always gets the job done. But what many don't know is that beyond the movie sets and Hollywood glamour, Statham is also a shrewd businessman, that he's not just endorsing products, he's building them. In one of his most surprising ventures, he quietly owns a string of luxury car dealerships across Southern California. These aren't just hands-off investments for Statham, but he's deeply involved in the day-to-day operations, believing that a successful business is built on integrity and customer satisfaction, that he regularly pores over sales figures, customer feedback, and employee performance reports. He's known to make unannounced visits, chatting with staff, and observing the showroom floor, always seeking ways to improve the customer experience, that he views his dealerships as an extension of his personal brand, a reflection of his values. For Statham, it's not just about selling cars. It's about building relationships and providing a service that exceeds expectations. He's instilled a company culture that prioritizes honesty, transparency, and a genuine commitment to helping customers find the perfect vehicle. He understood that a reputation, whether in Hollywood or the car industry, was everything. And recently, that reputation was about to be tested. That a small crack had appeared in the polished facade, threatening to unravel everything he had worked so hard to build. The catalyst for Statham's undercover operation was a scathing online review. A longtime customer, Mr. Abernathy, had written a detailed account of his recent experience at the flagship dealership. He described feeling pressured by a salesman, misled about financing options, and ultimately deeply disappointed with the entire process. Abernathy even went so far as to accuse the dealership of employing shady tactics, a term that stung Statham like a viper. Statham personally prided himself on the integrity of his dealerships. He had always preached honesty and transparency, and to see his business associated with such negativity was unacceptable. He initially dismissed it as a one-off incident, a disgruntled customer perhaps exaggerating their experience. But then, a second, similar review surfaced. And then a third. That a pattern was emerging, a disturbing trend that Statham couldn't ignore, that he knew he couldn't rely solely on management reports or employee feedback, that he needed to see for himself what was happening on the ground, to experience the dealership from a customer's perspective. That's when the idea struck him. He would go undercover. He would transform himself into an ordinary customer, walk in his own dealership, and observe the sales process firsthand. He would be a fly on the wall, a silent witness to the interactions between his staff and the unsuspecting public. It was a risky move, fraught with potential pitfalls, but Statham was determined to uncover the truth. No matter the cost, he needed to know if his commitment to ethical salesmanship was truly being upheld, or if a rot had set in that threatened to undermine everything he valued. Planning the disguise was almost as meticulous as choreographing a fight scene. Statham knew he couldn't just slap on a pair of glasses and hope for the best. He needed a complete transformation, a believable persona that wouldn't raise any red flags. He enlisted the help of a Hollywood makeup artist, a specialist in creating realistic disguises for film and television. Together, they crafted the character of Walter Humphrey, a retired accountant from Pasadena, looking to trade in his sensible sedan for a slightly more luxurious SUV now that the kids were grown. Walter was to be unassuming, a little bit awkward, and easily swayed by a persuasive salesperson. The makeup artist added subtle prosthetics to Statham's face, softening his strong jawline and adding a hint of a double chin. His signature shaved head was covered by a salt and pepper toupee, slightly askew for added authenticity. They chose clothing that screamed suburban dad, a slightly too large polo shirt, khaki pants, and comfortable walking shoes. Statham even practiced Walter's mannerisms, adopting a slightly hunched posture and a nervous habit of adjusting his glasses. He spent hours studying videos of ordinary people, mimicking their speech patterns and body language. He wanted Walter to be utterly unremarkable, a face that would blend seamlessly into the background. The goal was to become invisible, a silent observer who could gather information without arousing suspicion. IT was a role unlike any he had ever played before, but Statham was determined to nail it. He knew that the success of his undercover mission depended on the believability of Walter Humphrey. Walter Humphrey nervously adjusted his glasses as he stepped into the brightly lit showroom. The air was thick with the scent of leather and new car smell, a familiar aroma to Statham, but one he now experienced through Walter's slightly more apprehensive senses. The dealership was bustling with activity. Families admiring the SUVs, couples test-driving sports cars, and salespeople buzzing around. Like worker bees, he made a point of appearing slightly lost, wandering aimlessly through the rows of gleaming vehicles. Feigning interest in the features he already knew intimately, he observed the interactions between the sales staff and the customers, noting their body language, their tone of voice, and the specific phrases they used. He saw some genuine connections being made. Salespeople patiently answering questions and building rapport. But he also noticed instances of subtle pressure. Tactics, a slight exaggeration of a vehicle's fuel efficiency, or a vague promise of future discounts. He listened intently to the conversations. Picking up on the nuances of the sales pitches, he noticed one salesman, in particular, who seemed to be exceptionally smooth, effortlessly charming customers and closing deals with apparent ease. His name tag read Rick, and Statham couldn't help but feel a prickle of unease as he watched him in action. Rick seemed almost too good to be true, a natural salesman with an uncanny ability to connect with people. But something about his smile seemed practiced, that a little too perfect. Statham made a mental note to keep a close eye on him. The game was afoot. Rick was the kind of salesman who could sell ice to Eskimos, or, so the saying went, that he was tall, impeccably dressed, and possessed a disarming smile that seemed to put customers at ease instantly. He moved with a confident swagger, effortlessly navigating the showroom floor, always ready with a handshake and a witty remark. He had an uncanny ability to remember names, inquire about families, and tailor his sales pitch to each individual customer. He seemed to genuinely care, but Walter, or rather Statham, sensed a carefully constructed facade. IT was as if Rick was playing a role, reciting lines from a well-rehearsed script. His compliments felt insincere, his concern calculated. Statham watched as Rick skillfully steered a young couple towards a more expensive model, subtly downplaying their concerns about the higher monthly payments. He heard him casually mention a limited-time offer that conveniently expired at the end of the day, creating a sense of urgency. Rick was a master of manipulation, a seasoned professional who knew all the tricks of the trade. He was the kind of salesman that gave the car industry a bad name, the type of person Statham despised. But he couldn't jump to conclusions that he needed more evidence, a concrete example of Rick's dishonesty that he decided to make himself available to become Rick's next target. He just needed the opportunity. S.O. Walter Humphrey shuffled closer to the object of his concern, ready to become Rick's next potential payday. Rick, ever the opportunist, spotted Walter Humphrey ambling towards a gleaming SUV, his eyes wide with apparent admiration. "Good afternoon, sir," Rick boomed, his voice radiating warmth and enthusiasm. "Looking for something special today?" Walter, feigning nervousness, adjusted his glasses. "Oh, hello," he stammered. "Yes, well, I'm just browsing. Really, my wife and I were thinking of upgrading. The kids are grown, you see, and we thought we deserved something a little nicer." Rick's smile widened. "Absolutely, sir. You've come to the right place. This beauty right here," he gestured towards the SUV, "is our top-of-the-line model. Unbelievable comfort, incredible performance, and packed with all the latest features. What do you say we take a closer look?" Walter hesitated, pretending to be unsure. "Well, I don't want to take up too much of your time." "Nonsense, sir. My time is yours," Rick said smoothly, already guiding Walter towards the vehicle. "Now, let me tell you a little about this engine. It's a marvel of engineering, produces incredible horsepower, but it's also surprisingly fuel-efficient that you'll be saving money at the pump while enjoying a thrilling driving experience." Here it comes, Statham thought, the sales pitch beginning. He allowed Rick to open the door and usher him inside, bracing himself for the inevitable barrage of information and carefully crafted persuasion. The first red flag was subtle, a slight exaggeration of the SUV's MPG. Nothing major, but enough to plant a seed of doubt in Walter's mind. Rick had just begun, and Statham could sense this was going to be a long afternoon. "So, Walter," Rick continued, using his name with an almost unsettling familiarity. "What do you think? Pretty impressive, huh? And let me tell you about the safety features. This thing is like a fortress on wheels. You and your wife will be completely protected, no matter what the road throws at you." He then proceeded to highlight the various safety features, inflating their capabilities and downplaying any potential limitations. He claimed the SUV had virtually eliminated the risk of rollovers, a statement that Statham knew was patently false. He also glossed over the fact that some of the advanced safety systems were only available as expensive add-ons. Walter, playing his part, nodded along, occasionally interjecting with naive questions. "Oh, that's good to know," he'd say, adjusting his glasses and feigning ignorance. "My wife worries about safety, you see." Rick seized on this vulnerability, playing up the safety angle even further. "Well, you can tell her she has absolutely nothing to worry about in this vehicle. It's the safest SUV on the market, bar none." Statham's internal alarm bells were ringing. This wasn't just a slight exaggeration. It was a deliberate attempt to mislead, to exploit a customer's fears for personal gain. That he knew that the more Rick talked, the more likely he was to slip up, to reveal the true nature of his sales tactics. Statham decided to press him further. To see just how far Rick was willing to go, he asked a pointed question about the SUV's crash test ratings. A question he already knew the answer to. He waited with bated breath, eager to see how Rick would respond. The trap was set. Before Rick could answer Walter's question about the crash test ratings, he was interrupted by a phone call. "Excuse me for one moment, Walter," he said, flashing his practiced smile. "I need to take this. It's about another very important customer." As Rick walked away, Statham used the opportunity to observe him from a distance. He watched as Rick interacted with a young woman who was clearly interested in a smaller, more fuel-efficient car. Statham overheard snippets of their conversation, enough to realize that Rick was trying to steer her toward a larger, more expensive model, claiming it was safer and more reliable. He then witnessed Rick pressure an elderly couple into signing up for an extended warranty they clearly didn't need, using scare tactics about potential repairs and exorbitant costs. He saw Rick subtly manipulate the financing options for a young man, burying hidden fees and inflating the interest rate. The pattern was undeniable. Rick wasn't just a smooth salesman. He was a predator, preying on vulnerable customers and exploiting their trust for his own personal gain. Statham felt a surge of anger, a burning desire to intervene, to expose Rick's dishonesty and protect these unsuspecting individuals. But he knew he had to remain patient, to gather more evidence before making his move. He needed to catch Rick in a lie so blatant, so egregious, that there would be no room for doubt. The wait was excruciating, but Statham knew that justice would soon be served. He could feel it in his bones. Rick returned, his smile as polished as the showroom floor. "Sorry about that, Walter," he said. "Now, where were we? Yes, the crash test ratings. This SUV received the highest possible rating from every major safety organization, 0.5 stars across the board. You simply can't get any safer than this." Statham stopped cold. This wasn't just an exaggeration or a misleading statement. It was a blatant, outright lie. He knew for a fact that the SUV had received only a 4-star rating in one of the side impact tests. He had personally reviewed the data himself. The lie hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Statham felt a surge of anger, a white-hot fury that threatened to shatter his carefully constructed facade. He wanted to rip off the toupee, shed the khaki pants, and unleash the full force of Jason Statham on this deceitful charlatan. But he resisted the urge. He knew that blowing his cover now would be a mistake. He needed to remain calm, to gather his thoughts, and to plan his next move. He couldn't let Rick know that he had been caught, that his lies had been exposed. 5-star, huh? Walter said, his voice barely a whisper, as he forced a weak smile, pretending to be impressed. That's very reassuring. Inside, however, Statham was seething. He couldn't believe the audacity of this man, the sheer disregard for the truth. He had come here to investigate, to determine if the negative reviews were justified. Now he had his answer, and it was even worse than he had imagined. The time for observation was over. The time for action had arrived. The battle raging within Statham was intense. On one side, the cool, calculating businessman knew that exposing himself prematurely would jeopardize the entire operation, that he needed to gather more evidence, to build an airtight case against Rick, to ensure that he couldn't wriggle out of the consequences on the other side. The fiercely protective owner, the man who valued integrity above all else, was desperate to confront Rick immediately, to hold him accountable for his deception. The anger simmered just beneath the surface, threatening to erupt at any moment. He clenched his fists, fighting the urge to lash out, to tear down the facade of Walter Humphrey and reveal the steely gaze of Jason Statham. He thought about the countless hours he had spent building his dealerships, the unwavering commitment he had made to providing honest and ethical service. He thought about the trust that customers placed in his brand, the expectation that they would be treated with respect and fairness. And he thought about Rick systematically, undermining everything he had worked so hard to achieve. The frustration was palpable. He wanted to scream, to shout, to demand an explanation. But he knew that wouldn't solve anything. He needed a plan, a strategy, a way to expose Rick without jeopardizing the entire mission. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to regain control. He would not let his anger cloud his judgment, that he would remain calm, collected, and focused on the task at hand. He would gather more evidence, and then he would unleash the full force of justice upon Rick. The question was how. Statham, still disguised as Walter Humphrey, decided to subtly increase his surveillance. He casually pulled out his smartphone, pretending to check emails, but in reality, he activated the voice recorder app. He discreetly positioned the phone on the dashboard of the SUV, hoping to capture Rick's future interactions. That he also started paying closer attention to Rick's body language and nonverbal cues, looking for signs of deception. He noticed that Rick tended to avoid direct eye contact when making particularly outlandish claims, and his smile seemed to falter slightly when pressed for details to further document Rick's behavior. Statham considered purchasing a hidden camera, something small and inconspicuous that he could wear on his person. He knew it was a risky move, potentially illegal, but he felt it was necessary to build a solid case against Rick. He imagined the headlines. Action star exposes shady car salesman with hidden camera. It had a certain Hollywood appeal. That he also began taking detailed notes in a small notebook, jotting down specific examples of Rick's dishonesty, the dates and times of the interactions, and the names of the customers involved. He wanted to create a comprehensive record of Rick's misconduct, a document that would leave no room for doubt. That he needed ammunition, something that would not only get Rick fired, but also prevent him from preying on innocent customers at another dealership. The gathering of evidence became his new mission, his new objective. He would be a silent observer, a meticulous recorder, and a relentless pursuer of the truth. Needing definitive proof, Statham called his sister, Helena, a sharp-witted lawyer with a penchant for theatrics. He explained the situation and asked for her help in setting a trap for Rick. Helena, always up for a challenge, readily agreed. They devised a plan. Helena would pose as a single mother looking for a reliable and affordable family car. Statham, as Walter, would subtly steer her towards Rick, pretending to be an interested bystander. He would then observe their interaction from a distance, documenting every lie, every manipulation, every unethical tactic Rick employed. Helena arrived at the dealership the following morning, dressed in a modest outfit and sporting a slightly frazzled expression. She looked every bit the part of a struggling single mom. Statham, as Walter, approached her, feigning surprise. "Oh, hello there," he said, adjusting his glasses. "Are you looking for something?" Helena sighed dramatically. "Yes, I need a car. Something reliable and safe for my kids. But I'm on a tight budget, you see." "Well, you've come to the right place," Walter said, subtly guiding her towards Rick, who was conveniently standing nearby. "That young man over there is very helpful. Why don't you talk to him?" Helena nodded and approached Rick, while Statham, as Walter, positioned himself strategically nearby, ready to witness the final act of his carefully orchestrated plan. The stage was set. The bait was in place. Now, it was just a matter of waiting for Rick to take the plunge. Rick, sensing an easy target, immediately launched into his well-rehearsed routine. He greeted Helena with an overly enthusiastic smile, showering her with compliments and feigning concern for her situation. "Oh, I completely understand, ma'am," he said, his voice dripping with sincerity. "Being a single parent is tough, but don't worry, we'll find you the perfect car, something safe, reliable, and within your budget." But of course, that wasn't his intention at all. Statham watched as Rick skillfully steered Helena away from the affordable sedans she had initially expressed interest in toward the much larger and more expensive SUV, claiming it was the safest option for your children. He then proceeded to repeat many of the same dishonest tactics he had used on Walter, exaggerating the SUV's safety features, downplaying its fuel consumption, and glossing over the expensive add-ons. He even tried to pressure her into signing up for an extended warranty, using scare tactics about potential repairs. Helena, playing her part perfectly, feigned ignorance and vulnerability, asking naive questions and expressing concerns about the cost. Rick, like a spider ensnaring its prey, capitalized on her every hesitation, twisting her words and exploiting her fears. The trap was sprung. Rick was caught red-handed, repeating his dishonest sales techniques on an unsuspecting customer. Statham had all the evidence he needed. The time for subtlety was over. It was time to reveal himself. He started walking towards them, shedding the persona of Walter Humphrey with every step. The transformation was subtle but undeniable. As Statham approached, he straightened his posture, his shoulders squared, his gait firm and purposeful. The hunched posture of Walter Humphrey vanished, replaced by the confident stance of a man used to being in control. He reached up and, with a swift motion, yanked off the salt and pepper toupee, revealing his signature shaved head. He then removed the prosthetics from his face, wiping away the carefully applied makeup that had softened his features. The transformation was complete. Walter Humphrey was gone, replaced by Jason Statham. Rick, mid-sentence, stopped, abruptly, his eyes widening in disbelief. The practiced smile faltered, replaced by a look of utter shock and confusion. He stared at Statham, his jaw slack, his mind struggling to process what was happening. What's going on?" he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. Statham fixed him with a steely gaze, the kind that could intimidate hardened criminals and ruthless villains. "The game's over, Rick," he said, his voice low and menacing. "I know everything." He gestured towards Helena, who was struggling to suppress a smile. "This woman is my sister. She's a lawyer, and she's been documenting every lie, every manipulation, every unethical tactic you've used on her." Rick's face paled. He looked from Statham to Helena, then back to Statham, his eyes darting around the showroom, as if searching for an escape route. The realization of what he had done, of who he had been trying to deceive, finally dawned on him. The carefully constructed facade of the smooth-talking salesman crumbled, revealing the fear and desperation beneath. He knew he was caught, and he knew there was no way out. Despite the urge to unleash his signature action star fury, Statham remained remarkably composed. He spoke calmly, his voice measured and controlled, but with an underlying steeliness that left no room for argument. "I own this dealership, Rick," he stated, his gaze unwavering. "And I have a zero-tolerance policy for dishonesty and unethical behavior. You have violated that policy in the most egregious way possible." He proceeded to detail Rick's misconduct, citing specific examples of his lies and manipulations, the exaggerated safety claims, the inflated fuel efficiency numbers, the pressured sales tactics. He laid out the evidence, piece by piece, dismantling Rick's carefully constructed web of deceit. "You preyed on vulnerable customers, exploiting their trust for your own personal gain," Statham continued, his voice rising slightly with indignation. "You tarnished the reputation of this dealership, and you betrayed the values that I hold most dear." He paused, taking a deep breath. "I didn't come here looking for trouble, Rick. I came here to investigate, to determine if the negative reviews we've been receiving were justified. You provided me with the answer. and it's not an answer I like. He explained his reasons for going undercover, the concerns he had about the dealership's integrity, and the steps he had taken to uncover the truth. He emphasized the importance of honesty and transparency in the car industry, and the responsibility that salespeople had to treat customers with respect and fairness. This isn't just about selling cars, Rick, Statham concluded. It's about building relationships, providing a service, and earning the trust of our community. You have failed on all counts. Initially, Rick tried to deny everything. He stammered, offering weak excuses and claiming that he was simply doing his job. He insisted that he hadn't intentionally misled anyone and that his sales tactics were standard practice in the industry. I didn't know you were the owner, Mr. Statham, he stammered, his voice trembling. I swear I wouldn't have done any of this if I had known that I was just trying to make a living. He then shifted to justification, arguing that he was under pressure to meet sales quotas and that his livelihood depended on closing deals. He claimed that the customers he had targeted were savvy and could afford it, implying that they weren't being harmed by his actions. Everyone does it, Mr. Statham, he pleaded. It's just part of the game, that if I didn't do it, someone else would, that I have a family to feed, bills to pay. But as Statham continued to present the evidence, Rick's defenses began to crumble. The weight of his actions, the realization that he had been caught red-handed, finally began to sink in. His denials became less convincing, his excuses more feeble. Finally, a flicker of remorse appeared in his eyes that he looked down at the floor, his shoulders slumped, his face etched with shame. He mumbled an apology, barely audible. But Statham heard it nonetheless. It wasn't a heartfelt confession, but it was a start. I'm sorry, Mr. Statham, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I know I messed up, but I just got caught up in the moment. That I promise it won't happen again. Your apology is noted, Rick, Statham said, his voice firm but devoid of malice. But it doesn't change the fact that you have violated the trust of our customers and tarnished the reputation of this dealership. There are consequences for your actions. He informed Rick that he was immediately suspended without pay, pending a full investigation. He made it clear that if the investigation confirmed his misconduct, he would be terminated immediately. Consider this a wake-up call, Rick, Statham said. A chance to reflect on your actions and to decide what kind of person you want to be. You want to be a dishonest salesman who preys on vulnerable customers, or do you want to be a trusted advisor who provides honest and ethical service? But Statham's actions didn't stop there. He knew that simply firing Rick wouldn't solve the underlying problem. He needed to address the dealership's ethical issues at a systemic level to prevent similar incidents from happening in the future. That he announced that he would be implementing a comprehensive review of the dealership sales practices, including a thorough examination of training programs, sales quotas, and management oversight. He vowed to create a culture of honesty and transparency, where ethical behavior was rewarded and dishonesty was swiftly punished. He understood that a single bad apple could spoil the whole bunch, and he was determined to protect his business from further rot. Statham wasted no time in implementing sweeping changes across his dealerships. He started by completely overhauling the sales training program, replacing the old, high-pressure tactics with a new, customer-focused approach. The new training emphasized building relationships, providing honest information, and helping customers find the car that best met their needs. Even if it meant a smaller commission for the salesperson, he also instituted stricter oversight, requiring all sales interactions to be documented and reviewed by a sales manager. He implemented a mystery shopper program, hiring undercover investigators to pose as customers and evaluate the sales staff's performance. Any salesperson caught engaging in dishonest or unethical behavior would face immediate disciplinary action, up to and including termination. Sales quotas were revised to prioritize customer satisfaction over volume, rewarding salespeople for building long-term relationships rather than simply closing deals. He also implemented a transparent pricing policy, eliminating hidden fees and ensuring that customers understood exactly what they were paying for. Furthermore, Statham held mandatory ethics workshops for all employees, emphasizing the importance of integrity and ethical decision-making that he brought in. guest speakers from the Better Business Bureau and consumer advocacy groups to educate the staff on the rights of consumers and the responsibilities of businesses. He wanted to create a culture where ethical behavior was not just expected, but actively encouraged and rewarded. The message was clear: honesty was no longer optional. It was a requirement for success. Rebuilding trust was paramount. Statham knew that the negative reviews and the Rick incident had damaged the dealership's reputation, and he needed to take decisive action to win back the confidence of his customers. He started by personally reaching out to Mr. Abernathy, the customer who had written the initial scathing review. He apologized for the poor experience he had received and offered to make amends, providing him with a full refund and a complimentary service package. He also invited Mr. Abernathy to meet with him personally to discuss his concerns and to share his vision for the dealership's future. He launched a public relations campaign, emphasizing the dealership's commitment to transparency and ethical conduct. He released a statement, acknowledging the Rick incident and outlining the steps he was taking to prevent similar incidents from happening in the future. He also created a customer hotline, allowing customers to report any concerns or complaints directly to management. He offered discounts and incentives to existing customers, rewarding their loyalty and encouraging them to spread the word about the dealership's new and improved service. He also partnered with local charities and community organizations, demonstrating his commitment to giving back and supporting the community. His efforts paid off. Slowly but surely, the negative reviews began to fade, replaced by positive testimonial from satisfied customers. The dealership's reputation began to recover, and sales started to climb. Statham had proven that honesty and integrity were not just ethical imperatives, but also sound business practices. The Undercover experience was a watershed moment for Statham. It reinforced his belief in the importance of hands-on management and the need to constantly monitor every aspect of his business. That he realized that even with the best intentions, a company's culture could be easily compromised by a few bad actors. That he learned that trust was a fragile thing, easily broken and difficult to rebuild. He understood that customers were not just transactions. They were people with hopes, dreams, and vulnerabilities, and they deserved to be treated with respect and honesty. That he also gained a new appreciation for the challenges faced by his employees, the pressures they faced to meet sales quotas, and the temptations they faced to cut corners. He realized that he needed to create a system that supported ethical behavior, that rewarded honesty, and that discouraged dishonesty. The experience also taught him the importance of adaptability and innovation. He had to be willing to challenge conventional wisdom, to embrace new ideas, and to adapt to the ever-changing needs of his customers. That he knew that the car industry was evolving rapidly, and he needed to stay ahead of the curve to remain competitive. But perhaps the most important lesson he learned was the power of integrity. He saw firsthand the damage that dishonesty could inflict, not only on his business, but also on the lives of his customers. That he reaffirmed his commitment to ethical conduct, not just as a business strategy, but as a moral imperative. That he now knew that the Walter Humphrey experience, while initially jarring, had ultimately made him a better leader. Jason Statham's journey undercover into his own car dealership serves as a powerful testament to his unwavering commitment to ethical business practices and his dedication to providing exceptional customer service. He faced a challenge head-on, transforming himself into an ordinary customer to expose dishonesty and restore integrity within his organization. The story highlights the importance of hands-on leadership, the fragility of trust, and the need for constant vigilance in maintaining a positive and ethical company culture. That Statham's actions demonstrate that true success is not just about profits, but also about building relationships, earning respect, and upholding values. He not only took swift action to address the immediate problem, but also implemented lasting changes to prevent future misconduct. His efforts to rebuild trust with existing customers and attract new ones underscore the importance of transparency, honesty, and community engagement. Statham's experience serves as a reminder that even in the fast-paced and competitive automotive industry, integrity should never be sacrificed for short-term gains. Ultimately, his commitment to ethical conduct and customer satisfaction sets him apart as a leader and a role model. In an industry often plagued by stereotypes of shady salesmen and hidden fees, Jason Statham's story offers a glimmer of hope. A reminder that honesty and transparency can thrive, and that one person's commitment to ethical practices can make a real difference. After all, shouldn't buying a car be about finding the right ride, not navigating a minefield of lies?